Hello, Garland Nixon here with Dr. Jim Kavanaugh, and a deal is needed. And we've got the U.S. that's agreement incapable and unable to act like professional diplomats. And then we've got Israel, which are civilizationally incapable and unable to act like civilized human beings. Let's talk. Hello, Garland Nixon here with Dr. Jim Kavanaugh, and we got plenty to talk about. There's talks of 14-point plans, right? 14-point plans. Well, let's see. We had 28-point plans, 10-point plans. Now we're 14-point plans. The issue ain't the plan. The issue is, can the people involved in the plan keep the deal? Are they willing to? Jim Kavanaugh, let's start with this. Iran has really been very successful fighting two nuclear powers thus far, soundly defeating both simultaneously and putting them and playing. It's just sometimes every country has a certain amount of power to play. Man, they have been really good in the way that they've played their hand. Jim Kavanaugh, your thoughts. Iran, how have they played their hand so far?
Brilliantly. Look, they've used their strengths, their asymmetric advantages, namely the Strait of Hormuz, but also just the fact that they're a huge country and they have been developing a weapons capability, and they're able to produce weapons and good weapons. And they've gotten help from their friends, Russia and China, but they have developed their own weapons capabilities. And they've had a political unity and a social unity. The Americans thought they would go in and stoke up some kind of Pahlavi uprising for democracy. This ridiculous thing in the world. And people just didn't buy it. They armed insurrectionists who tried to feed off serious demonstrations about economic issues and turn them into an insurrection against the regime, and it didn't work. And so that card is out of play. They're not going to stoke an insurrection. And the Iranian people are more unified than ever. People who were part of that demonstration said, I'm an Iranian. This is not what I was in the streets fighting for with, when talking about economic issues. And they've done brilliant ideologically. I mean, please watch these Iranian Lego videos. They are fabulous. They're brilliant. They just did, and they're doing them now, appealing to the American people. We're not your enemy. This isn't helping you. And they're just fabulous. So, and they've, the important thing is that nobody knew what was going to happen here. And you've got their main partners and their main helpers, Russia and China. And those countries want stability. Okay. And, they always did and probably always will promote to Iran that they should negotiate, please negotiate, let's not have a war. And they were going to see what happened with Iran. Look what happened with Syria. Syria collapsed because Syrian army collapsed. And the political hold of the Assad regime in Syria collapsed very quickly. So what could Russia do about it, So here, watching what happened, watching the fact that Iran fought the United States, not just to a standstill, but fought them into a position that they have the advantage. And they have made it clear. Iran has the escalation dominance here. They can be hurt. They can be bombed. They can be nuked. But you're not getting through the Strait of Hormuz. They can destroy the oil infrastructure of the Persian Gulf, which is a major thing and a major economic thing. And everybody's going to be hurt by it. And they're not backing down because they're scared of being bombed or nuked. And they fought the Americans to a standstill. The American Navy has to stay the hell out of the Persian Gulf. And the Iranians, and then they went to negotiations once, twice, three times a lady. They went with Arachi to negotiate with these clowns, Witkoff and Kushner, and then J.D. Vance, and nothing came of it. So the Chinese and the Russians are now, look, we know we're supporting you. I believe that that's their situation. Their attitude now is, we know. Lavrov said, repeating again, the Americans, as you said, are agreement incapable. And they know that's the case with Iran too. So they've got Iran's back here very strongly. So Iran is getting provisioned. Iran is getting support. And Iran is, therefore, in turn, provisioning and supporting Hezbollah. And Hezbollah is fighting Israel in Lebanon. And Iran is taking the stand. We want a ceasefire, not just in Iran, but in Lebanon. We've got to quiet this whole damn thing down and get the Israelis and the Americans off their aggression. So they're in a very strong position. They've played it beautifully. And on the other hand, the Trump administration are a bunch of fools. I mean, Trump himself obviously does not know what he's doing. And he's surrounded by people who are either neocons and want him to blow everything up, or they know this is really bad, but they're too afraid to actually stop him. So this is a very dangerous. It is a very dangerous situation. The big wild card, I always say, is Israel, because they will nuke anybody before they surrender. And the Americans, the Trump administration does not know what to do. He literally, from 1 hour to the next, he has a different plan and a different, the war is on, the war is off. The blockade is on, the blockade is off. We're going to guide them through where that's their business. It's not, we don't care about it. So we're in a crazy situation. It's almost difficult. It's almost science fiction. It's difficult to figure out what to say about this, because the principles, one of the principles, the United States really is disconnected from reality in a very serious way. So it's hard to tell how you even can get into this. They're not agreement incapable. They are discussion incapable, because they don't really understand what's going on. And the other players, Iran and Israel, are determined. So I don't know what's going to happen. I really don't know. But I do know Iran has played this beautifully, and it's been a plus for the world. They have pushed this issue of Israeli control over American foreign policy. Now, there was just an article today in the Washington Post about how both the Republicans and the Democrats are facing challenges from within about Israeli control of American policy. The wonderful thing that came up yesterday, 30 Democratic, I couldn't believe it, congressmen or senators are both pushed forward a thing saying the United States has to acknowledge that Israel has nuclear weapons. We cannot be going into arguments, into wars over potential Iranian nuclear weapons with any credibility if we don't acknowledge Israel's nuclear weapons, which would be a very powerful thing and a very dangerous thing, because legally speaking, according to the Glenn and Symington amendments, if Israel has nuclear weapons, they're not eligible for American aid. They disqualified for American aid. Of course, that can be waived by presidential decree, but it's very important that the American people hear that. This nonsense this was never about Iranian nuclear weapons. I always say again, I hope Iran is listening to me, they shouldn't even talk about nuclear weapons. We're not talking about nuclear weapons unless Israel's nuclear weapons are on the table too. That's fair. And that's the way it should be. So, and Americans can understand, anybody can understand that. It's the media and the politicians have gotten away with just for pretending not to think about Israel's nuclear weapons. They don't have them. This is not fair and it's not right. And they're the most dangerous weapons in the Middle East. So I think Iran's done great. And I don't know what I still suspect. And I will say, I still suspect 70% chance or so that the Americans will attack again. But we'll have to see.
One of the other things that's interesting is, the side things that are going on alongside this. And that is, the U.S. decide, kind of morphing this into okay, we're going after Iran, but we always want to go after China. So we got some options here to go after China, and choke them off from Iranian oil, et cetera, et cetera. And then China said something that they had on the books that they weren't enforcing, basically. And that is, we are forbidding all of our refineries to respect American sanctions. And I think they were already doing it as far as Russian oil is concerned. What was interesting is that the Indians eventually, a while back, said that, well, when the Biden administration said we're sanctioning anybody who buys Russian oil, they came to us privately and said, keep buying it because we need to keep the prices down, right? But my point being, with China saying, look, that's it. We're not abiding by this crap. I get the feeling that that's going to be one of the things, because China's the people, they have the horsepower that can do it. I think the end, first of all, the end of U.S. hard power is near, if not here. Exactly. It's nowhere near what it was before. People aren't afraid of it. But additionally, I think the end of U.S. sanctions is around the corner. I think the other countries, once you're shown to be weak, once you're shown to be vulnerable and you've been pushing people around, I think the sanctions thing is going to be next that, say, a Russia, China, Iran, et cetera, are going to start trying to weaken. Your thoughts on that, Jim?
Oh, absolutely. Look, that was very good that China said that explicitly. China is really at this point fed up with the Americans and with, again, they wanted to be peaceful. They wanted to settle things diplomatically. They wanted to believe, I think both China and Russia wanted to believe that, we can talk to the Americans, the Trump regime will be different, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. They actually believe the stuff that the United States has been saying about international law and relations, et cetera. And, they had to learn, and they have, I think, that this is just baloney. The Americans are agreement incapable. And now you're in the situation, because that wasn't the case for 30 years after the fall of the Soviet Union, but now it is, a situation where the Americans are not that powerful anymore. Relatively speaking, they've lost power to the Russians and the Chinese, and the Chinese can very easily say, we're not paying any attention to your sanctions crap. Why should anybody in the world, one country in the world, situate itself and demand that every country, third countries, obey the sanctions that the Americans have put on this country? You have to obey those sanctions or we're going to punish you. And the Chinese are saying, what are you going to do to us? You're not going to do anything to us. I mean, that we can't destroy you in retaliation. And the Americans know it economically. They should know it. So everybody is watching this militarily and economically. The American power has diminished and it's been shown to be diminished. And people are sitting up and saying, we're going to just ignore your threats. You're making a threat that you're going to, let's see what happens. We're going to buy, China is the big one, but everybody is going to say, well, okay, Americans won't do business. We'll do business with China. The big, the big stick that the Americans hold over everybody is the financial payment system and the dependence on the dollar and moving dollars. And, they're going to get around that. Look, it's already happened. They thought they would destroy Russia with the sanctions from hell, and with the ruble, the ruble's going to be rebel. That's what they thought they were going to do in 2022, from 2014 to 2022. But in 2022, when the Russian operation started, they said, "Now this is going to do it. The oligarchs will overthrow Putin. The military will overthrow Putin." Didn't happen. And Russia's doing all right. Their economy is doing all right. China's economy is certainly doing fine. And so the Americans have lost the power of intimidation, although they don't yet entirely realize it. And it's getting to the point where they're going to have to realize it and acknowledge it. And whether they realize it or not, there's nothing they can do about it. There's nothing they can do to China that China can't do back to them tenfold. So other countries are going to see we need good relationships with China and Russia, and we need to break our sense of not only dependence from, but fear of the United States. They can hurt us, but other people can help us, and we can structure new arrangements around the world such that whatever the United States does from us, it's not so bad. Look, I just saw China. I think they built in Nigeria all the production facilities, not just getting the oil out of the ground, but refineries. So these are things the Chinese do around the world, and that I think is going to happen. It's going to happen, I hope, among the Gulf countries, happening in Latin America. It's one of the reasons the United States wants to get rid of Venezuela and Cuba, because they don't want the Chinese helping them to build up an independent economy.
The other thing is this. I'll say this about the Russians, though. I've heard people say that Russians believe it. I've toured Russia. I've toured the Presidential Academy, which is their school of international studies for diplomats, right? I have yet to meet one individual, not even a person wandering down the street in Russia, who believed for 1 second that the U.S. could be trusted under any circumstances. They're 100 times more cynical than even you and I. When you go in Russia, I mean, I put it like this. What it said is the government, there, if you talk to people and say, what the government's doing, they'll say they're negotiating for the sake of negotiation. You know what I mean? It's busy work. But they're more cynical than we are. Anyway, what I was going to say is this. Number one, I think when this is done, China comes in and does rebuilding in Iran, helps with rebuilding with Iran, number one.
Sure.
Number two, here's the other part of it. Iran has a wealth of natural resources, including gas and oil and other things. With without a sanctions regime on them, and of course, with China and other countries now saying we're going to ignore the sanctions regime, Iran's going to be a very, very financially successful country. I mean, I think, which means, here's why do I say that? For this reason. I don't think the Russians, the Chinese, the Iranians, or anybody but on the face of this earth who's got half a brain thinks that whatever they sign as a deal, that the U.S. and Israel will keep it. They know, yeah, we'll do what we got. We'll sign it something. Oh, great. We'll have a ceremony. We'll shake hands. We'll walk away. And they're going to be plotting on violating the deal before it's even the ink's dry. They know that. But I think what they also realize is the one thing they understand is a punch in the nose. And they don't, they can't afford that. And number two, we're going to be a rich country. We can be much, much stronger. And I think you're going to see Iran become much, much more militarily powerful. I think they're going to build their military much stronger, and they're going to tighten their grip on the Gulf, on the Straits of Hormuz. And of course, the other countries in the area are going to know this. We can't rebuild unless Iran says we can be rebuild, unless there's a deal. Because if we rebuild and Iran doesn't say yes, then they can blow it up anytime we want to. And can we put tens, if not hundreds of billions into rebuilding the stuff that Iran blew up, unless Iran says we promise not to blow it up again? So they all of them got to have a guarantee from Iran and or Russia and China that Iran won't blow it back up.
Yeah, look, that's
what
exactly
the United
right.
States says. Go ahead.
Yeah. That's exactly right. Look, the Israelis, this was a conundrum for the Americans and the Europeans and the international community. The Israelis blow up Gaza in 2011, 2014, 2020, and then they bring in international aid and they rebuild it for some of it, blah, 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 and they blow it up again. So that's bad enough when it's Gaza, but you can't do that with the oil infrastructure of the Persian Gulf, okay? You can't do that. And Iran has demonstrated it's got the capability of destroying that infrastructure, okay? So we need a deal. We need a settlement that's a final settlement that creates a new security architecture in the Middle East and in the Persian Gulf, in which everybody is secure in the idea that they're not going to get attacked against, starting with Iran. And therefore, everybody else is secure that they're not getting attacked. And everybody has respectful, reciprocal economic relations with each other, and not based on waiting to see what the Americans and Israelis are going to try and pull next week. And that's going to require some force that mediates and kind of stands behind the new relations among the powers of the Gulf and Iran. So that's got to be, can't be the United States. This is one of the crucial things. The United States has demonstrated to everyone, I think, that it cannot be the diplomatic center of anything. Okay, it's always been what the United States is going to. It's going to be the chair of diplomacy in the Middle East. It's the one to everybody has to come and say how we can get the United States to help us get together and not attack each other. That was always baloney, because the United States was always nothing but Israel's lawyer. And now everybody knows it's baloney. So the United States, I think, really has to recognize already it's gone from the diplomatic center of the Middle East, and I think the entire world now. And that's really very, very important. And Russia and China are going to have to replace it in some way, some other nexus of countries. I guess Pakistan and Turkey could be part of it, but these countries of the Middle East, of the Persian Gulf, are going to have to create an arrangement that everyone agrees on, that they know they're not going to get attacked, and that's the end of that. But they cannot do that with the United States and Israel. As you say, the United States will always come to Israel's aid no matter what Israel wants to do. And this is why, even now, this war cannot be ended until Israel is out of it. Because Israel can, as long as the United States is saying, we will guarantee Israel's victory in any circumstance, we will guarantee that Israel won't lose in any circumstance, then the United States is in it. And Israel knows that. And Israel will put the Americans in a position where they say, you have to either come in to help us, this has happened many times in the past, or we're going to lose. And then, you can't allow that. And that's where the American-Israeli lobby comes in, et cetera, et cetera. But this has to end. And so that, everybody knows there's stable peace that won't be disrupted by some kind of action that comes out of Israel or the United States to overthrow this horrible Iranian regime, or to get rid of Hezbollah, or to get rid of Hamas, or whatever. This has to be a new regime entirely in the middle, a new security regime in the Middle East, a new regime of relationships that is founded to the exclusion of the United States. The United States is a bystander in this, not anymore the diplomatic center of it.
Absolutely. I'm with you 100% there on everything. Let me ask you this, speak to this. There's a paradox of Trumpism, and that is that his over-the-top actions creates a dynamic wherein people are revolted by the U.S. Like Obama walks around with a nice looking suit on and smiles, and he sounds smart, and he shakes hands, and then he goes out and he does his kill list every Tuesday and exactly. Overthrows Libya and Ukraine and everything else, right? Trump knuckle drags his way out to the podium and says something crazy and tells everybody we're pirates. That's a very positive thing for the world, if you know what I'm saying, Jim. Go ahead.
Yeah. Look, I wrote an article about this, the Trump effect, Donald the Destroyer. This is the beneficial Trump effect. He lays bare what's really going on with American imperialism, and as opposed to this, the smooth talking, the smooth operator, Obama, who makes it sound like he's doing something nice to everybody when he's overthrowing governments. And this is what, everybody was afraid of the first iteration of Trump. And I quoted European diplomats as saying, this is a problem, because this doesn't make it look good for us to be allied with this guy. But he wasn't that bad in the first iteration. Now it's just ridiculous. He's going to blowing up boats in the Caribbean. And where did I see the other day? Up somewhere else, he was blowing up boats, fishing boats.
The Pacific too. Yeah, the Pacific.
Somewhere in the Aegean Ocean, the Pacific Ocean, blowing up, kidnapping a president and his wife. It's just nuts. And then, not only supporting which Biden did too. I mean, Biden also, but supporting the genocide in Gaza and the Israeli invasion of Lebanon. But his ambassador comes out and says, "Oh yeah, the Israelis can take anything they want." Why should anybody complain about that? This is crazy stuff. So he has done more, to help destroy the American imperialism and all the leftists in the United States, and that's a positive thing. Of course, it's not positive for the people on the other, but it's the policy that's the problem for the people on the other end of it, and we have to exploit that. We have to say it, and everybody should realize this. It is hard as Americans to see what's going on, but it wasn't that hard. You could see what Trump was really about, and as you could see what Obama was really about and Biden was really about. So this is the beneficial Trump effect. Exactly. That guy like Mark Carney, the president, the prime minister of Canada, says, "Oh yeah, this has always all been hypocritical, and all this rules-based order and stuff has always been something that we use to our advantage. It's been our instrument for controlling the world, that ours being the Americans, really, and everybody's going to come to grip with it. Look, he's taking 5,000 troops out of Germany. Trump is destroying NATO. Good." So this is what we need. But the problem is, can you build a political movement in the United States which is clear about this, which understands where it's going, what it wants in terms of this, and is able to contest the political battle in the United States. And the fact is that the duopoly has created a situation where it's virtually impossible to do that. They've locked it up. So you've got to everybody's going to bounce back to the Democrats, and you'll have 5 new progressive Democrats who will come on and blah, 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 they'll get eaten up. So I don't know what's going to happen. This is the danger. We're at the end of it for the United States. We're at the end of it. Everybody has to realize this. This pretense that we're the good guys is over. We were never the good guys.
Right.
From Korean War to now, we were the most, as Martin Luther King said in the 60s, the biggest purveyor of violence in the world. We were the most anti-democratic force in the world, from Korea to Vietnam, all around the world, to Chile, to Venezuela, the United States, to Iran, 1953. The United States was the biggest force for destroying democratic movements in the world, okay? And the United States and Israel have been the biggest forces for racism and colonialism in the Middle East, for destroying, for absolutely horrible colonialist policies towards the Palestinians. And this is, so we have to get over this. We have to realize this is over. We can't pretend we're going back to some golden age before Trump when everything was okay. There was no such age. It was all imperialism and capitalism and Zionism. And the capitalist part of it is going to come to eat us all up very quickly. It is eating us up very quickly. We're in a society in the United States which is higher inequality than the Gilded Age, where people can't afford health insurance, they can't afford rent. I have a nurse who was taking care of my father-in-law, who's 99. She's a great woman, nice family. They're not poor. She had to give up the job she had and take a job in a hospital because that's the only way she could get health insurance. Their family's health insurance went up from $500 to $1,600 a month. As a nurse, that's impossible. So this is nuts. And this is while they're going around building data centers, using 500,000, 1 million gallons of water a day, and they're getting it through local councils like that. You could never do that build a damn bus stop. It takes 2 years. They're trying to push it through. Now they're getting a lot of pushback. Glad on this. But the fact is we live in the dictatorship of capital. The world has lived in the imperialist dictatorship of the United States. That's over. We live in the dictatorship of capital. I'd like to see that be over, but it's not. But we all have to realize the pretenses are over. We were never the good guys. We're not the good guys. We're the bad guys. And we and the Israelis particularly. And if we're going to be the good guys, we have to overthrow the Democratic and Republican parties. Somehow we have to figure out a way of doing that. And it's going to be, I don't know. I don't see it. Tell me how to do it.
Well, here's the other thing too, and I get this from, doing my radio show in DC, my Pacifica network show. And I get the call because, there are people that are diehard Democrats. And I get the callers that come in. Well, don't you think that Trump is terrible? And I say, I agree. Absolutely. And yeah. Trump, yeah. And that since, and then Scott comes, and since he's come in, this, that, and I was like, that's where we do. Yeah. And then I start naming, was Trump here during when we literally used biological agents and weapons against Korea?
Yep.
Was he there in Indonesia in 1965 when we were slaughtering left-leaning people, 1 million people? Was he there in the first 9/11? And I believe it was 73, where we installed Pinochet, a dictator. They were throwing people out of helicopters. And I went on and on. How about 3 million Vietnamese? How about Cambodia and Laos, where there was poor rice farmers, and what's his name? Henry Kissinger said, anything that flies on anything that moves, just bomb all these people. Trump was there? Was he there when he overthrew Libya? And I kept going on and on. How can you look at the record of piracy, of theft, of assassinations, of government overthrows, of all of this, and say, when Trump came in, things went bad?
Yep.
And it's like the guy's a diehard Democrat. And it's like they want to believe exactly what you said. Well, before Trump came, we were the good guys. We were standing for democracy. We were doing this. We were doing that. All of that. Yes, we're Ukraine for democracy. All this horse crap.
Yeah.
And if you understand the history of the United States, you can't possibly look at Donald Trump and say you can look at him as a detestable human being. Fair enough. But you can't say that he's doing anything worse than the people before him.
Yeah. Yep. Just stupid. He's doing it more stupidly, but
That's a good thing.
and that's a good thing. That's a good thing. I did write a whole log about this. Donald the Destroyer, the Trump effect. This is a good thing. Everybody can see it, but it's hard. Because what are you going to do about it? I just had this discussion on an email chain. What do you think we should do, Jim? I don't really know what the answer to that is, because I do know what the answer is, but I know generally speaking what kinds of things you'd have to do in the United States to change the political character of the country. But we have to realize, and this is part of it, they've locked this up. You can't get on the ballot. They have the media.
Yes.
You can't.
Yes.
Okay, we have now media that overcome that. That's true. The podcast media that can overcome that. But they've locked up the ballots. You can't get on the ballot. And now they're instituting censorship, and they're going to throw people out of jobs. They are throwing people out of jobs. We're going to have to contest that. But we have to, in order to get on the ballot, what do you do? What do you have to do? And that's completely unfair and completely ridiculous. And it's designed to keep people off the ballot. Plus, the electoral procedures themselves. We have to realize the electoral procedures themselves stink. They are designed to enable fraud. Whether it occurs on, you have 50 different states, you have hundreds of different counties, and they're proprietary election machines. There should be nothing proprietary in an election. Sorry, but mail-in ballots, absentee ballots are not a good thing. They are as the Jimmy Carter and the bipartisan Jimmy Carter and Reagan, Trump's chief of staff, Reagan, had a commission on, and they said mail-in ballots, absentee ballots are the biggest vector of potential fraud. That's kind of obvious. You need election procedures in all 50 states and all how many thousand counties there are that are fair, that are transparent, that everybody who votes can see from the minute they vote where their vote has gone, where it's been, should be counted in person at the precinct level. No vote should be moved. No boxes of votes should be moved around without being counted in person in the presence of everybody, live streamed to the entire world. No reason you can't do that. There are very simple procedures you could use to have a transparent, fair election that would be very hard to cheat. And they deliberately don't do that. They deliberately fight among themselves about what they think is going to be more advantageous to them. So all of this stuff is, we have to have serious debates about it and forge policies about it in ways that aren't obviously designed from one party or another to advantage. And they always do that stupidly. Oh, this will work better for me, so let's institute this policy, or let's prevent this policy, and it ends up not working so well for them. So you got to get over this and have serious elections in which you have fair proceed and get the money out of politics. You got to control the amount of money that parties can spend, and somehow or that's going to be difficult to do. So, but nobody is even thinking about this. They're fighting the partisan fights about electoral procedures, some of which are right, some of which are wrong. But they're really, each party is thinking, well, I should do this because that'll help us, and that doesn't work very well. And it's not democratic, and we don't have even an electoral democracy. We have to understand this. The electoral, that's why I don't vote. I have no assurance that the vote I cast is going to be counted for whom I cast it. I have no assurance that on the federal election. And people have to understand how terrible that is. And it can be overcome. It's not that hard, especially with the technology we have today. But nobody wants to do it, and they've locked it up. And that's kind of a prerequisite to any nonviolent political change, is that you have to be able to have an effect through the political and electoral process. And they have made it so we can't have an effect through the political and electoral process. And that's extremely dangerous. The prerequisite to any political change is that the parties of the left and the right, who are outside of the duopoly, have to get together and say, we are not going to run candidates. We are not going to participate in this until we have an electoral system that's fair, that we see, okay, that's fair. And we understand how it works, and we see where the votes go and how they're counted, et cetera. And unless you do that, well, why would you participate in this? I've always said it's like sitting down at a poker table where you can't see what the deal is dealing. He's controlling the chips behind the screen. He tells you how. Why would you sit at that table? Not because you cherish your money, but because you're wasting it. If you cherish your vote, you won't sit, you cherish your money, you won't sit at that poker table. The only reason you sit at that poker table is they put this whole thing, you must sit at that table. That's how you cherish your vote. No, it isn't. If you cherish your vote by saying, I'm not going to use it in this context, I'm not going to waste my vote, I'm not going to waste my money sitting at this poker table. You show me a table where I can see all the cards, see everybody, blah, 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 then I'll sit at the table. But you can tell me it's my civic duty to sit at that table. Well, no, I have no idea whether they're going to be cheated or not.
Well, there's another side of it too, Jim, because there's several parts to democracy. And if any of the parts is missing, you don't have democracy, because you can have a pristine process, right? The process is pristine. The Garland and Jim are in charge of it. We're going to do fingerprints to make sure it's you, with a thumbprint at every voting meeting, everything you could imagine. Everything's perfect. We're going to do nothing but handwritten in votes, and they will be hand counted. And in the end, you've got Kamala Harris attacking Trump because he's not Zionist enough. And you've got a Republican that they literally had a sign up at their convention that said Israel first, right? Yeah. So you do the process, it's part of it, and you got to have the process straight, but clearly that's broken. But the outcome is now I'm voting on two people arguing over which is the most ardent Zionist. Kamala attacked Trump. Why'd she attack him? Because he didn't love Israel enough. Because he wasn't belligerent enough against Iran. Cards are on the table. All options are on it. This was Kamala Harris. So in the end, Amos Hochstein recently said on a Sunday, well, if Biden had won, we'd have probably bombed them anyway, right? Yeah. So ultimately, you can't get democracy if all you've got is a pair of warmongering Zionist corporate puppets. That's the other part of it. Jim.
Yeah, well, I think that's why one of the things that we absolutely need is ranked choice voting, so that this whole idea of you wasting your vote if you vote for so-and-so, you have ranked choice voting. If you have people who are in the race, candidates, and who are espousing strong anti-Zionist, strong pro-socialist, strong social democratic programs, really fighting every minute. The Democrats are nuts. They should be if there were an opposition party, it would be fighting every day for a single payer healthcare. This would be, they'd never stop talking about it, and they'd win every election. And they deliberately spent the last two elections preventing it and denouncing it and saying it'll never ever happen. All of these things, fighting every day that we don't fight Israel's wars. Israel's not our friend. We don't have anything to do with that colonialism. If you had those people and you do have some of them in the electoral arena, but the fact is everybody gets afraid because they know either the Democrats or Republicans are going to win. So, but if you had the ranked choice voting and you could see, okay, and suddenly those parties and those people who were saying those things would suddenly show how strong they really are and how they would be able to contest things. That's why we need ranked choice voting. And that would change the prospects of American elections very radically, I think, because you'd have people out there saying things and getting a lot of votes. And even if their second choice was the Democrat or Republican and it went to that, okay, but maybe it wouldn't be their second choice. Maybe their second choice would be the Libertarian. Maybe the left party, the left voters' second choice would be the Libertarian. Maybe the right voters' Libertarian's second choice would be the Socialist. This is not impossible. So you have a different situation if you have ranked choice voting. I think it's absolutely crucial. I think it's a prerequisite. Again, these are prerequisites. You're absolutely right. The most important thing is what's your position on the issues, and the most important thing is what's the position of the United States government going to be on the issues. And that's, we can only change that peacefully through democratic electoral means if the democratic electoral process is fair and transparent, and everybody understands it that way and feels that, and everybody can see that.
One thing is obvious right now. We don't have anything resembling democracy or whatever you want to call it, a constitutional republic or anything like that, because it's an outcome. And when we get to a point where somebody runs and says, vote for me, and you won't get whatever, if you vote for that other person, you're going to get a war with Iran. If you vote for me, you won't get a war with Iran. Fair enough. You know what? I can respect somebody that says, I don't like that guy. And I know people like that who said that don't like that guy, can't stand him. But hey, he says there won't be any more wars, so I'll vote for him because I don't want wars. Yeah, the practical, that makes sense. And then the guy
Absolutely.
gets in, it's like, gotcha. You're getting the war anyway, right?
Yep.
I think that is important, and that's positive, a positive thing for to happen, because now you're going to have people who have no trust in these people, and you should have no trust in these people.
That's right.
Donald Trump kept saying, "I have no war. I haven't started a war. No wars. No wars." But what did he also say? I love Israel. Anything for Israel, and a kiss butt for Israel day and night. You're not going to have those two things together. You're not going to be a Zionist puppet and say that you're not going to do it. People have to put two and two together. The only way you're going to say I'm anti-war, you have to be anti-Zionist or you're not anti-war. That's crap. And what Trump showed with is if you're pro-Zionist, you'll do the same thing to the American people that you're going to do to Iran, Russia, China, everybody else. You'll make it a bargain with them. You'll promise anything you want to, because it's easy to promise things when you have no intentions of delivery. Yeah, tell me what you want. I want a pony. You got it. I can't give you the pony, so I might as well promise it. That's what people have to understand about Zionism and a corrosive effect it has on this country.
Yes. And the world. Look, there's going to be no peace in the world until Zionism is defeated and eliminated. It really has to be like there will be no peace in Africa until South Africa and Rhodesia and those. And not that there's all that much peace in Africa now, but those things, there was going to be resistance to that, fighting resistance. And there's going to be no peace in the Middle East and therefore in the world until Zionism is defeated. And Zionism will not be defeated as long as the United States guarantees its existence. There will be no peace, therefore, for the United States until it stops. It divorces itself from Zionism and really not a conscious uncoupling, a real serious negative divorce, and it turns it into an enemy of, because what should be, as apartheid should be an enemy of the United States, but that requires an internal revolution in the United States in a certain sense. So that's right. There'll be no peace for the United States as long as it is implicitly and really guarantor of Israel's project, of the Zionist project. The United States thinks of itself that way. They've persuaded the American people that that's part of the American project. The Zionist project is part of the American project, and this is the 51st state, etc. This is baloney. Baloney for 78 years, baloney. And this has to stop. And everybody has to understand this is not ours. It's something we should oppose as Americans. And that will open the way for the possibility of peace in the Middle East in the way that there will never be as long as Israel is there fighting for the Zionist project.
Yeah, and what we're seeing already is this, because you can see it. The Democrats, I mean, are just absolutely horrible, but there's good things going on there, because there was a couple of Democrats who were on a stage, a United Auto Workers stage in Michigan, and they got booed off the stage. We're starting to see people who are Democrats look at the party, some in any way, you got the deaf, dumb, and blind people, no shortage of them in both parties, but people who are starting to say, well, I'm a Democrat, but I want something different. Well, that's at least a start. When you start to acknowledge the Democratic Party, they still haven't quite got it that, yeah, you got a Democrats or Republicans or what have you. They're still somewhat deluded, but I think there's people starting to wake up, and I think these gas prices will help wake people up.
Oh my God. Yeah. Look, the health insurance prices, the gas prices. This is the point. I think people, I don't think people are ready for what's coming. Very quickly, there's going to be a very bad situation in this country, and that's why they're building all these damn data centers. This is for surveillance and control. This is for the Palantirs to run the damn, to know, to control you everywhere, to know everything you're doing, control you. That's what this is about. They know there's shit hitting the fan here that nobody's gonna tolerate. You can't tolerate these gas prices. You can't tolerate these health insurance prices. You can't tolerate these rents. People can afford nothing. And so this is something. How are you going to change that? Again, this is the problem for me and for us is, what are you going to do about it? Well, I can't, we have to have a movement. We have to have political parties and a political movement that is able to organize and effectively contest in the political space. And people are going to have to start doing something about that fast, because their own lives are getting screwed up by this. Look at what I just said about my friend, this nurse. What does that do to her family? She has a kid going to college. She has another kid in high school. Suddenly her health insurance goes from $500 to $1,500 a month. She's got to take another job. She got a good job. She's a very smart woman, and she just finished her nursing degree, and she got a good job. But we shouldn't be running around, all of us incipient entrepreneurs, at war for him or herself. We should have a social responsibility. This country has the wealth everybody should have health care like they do in any other developed country. Everybody should be. Look, when I was a kid, there used to be laws against usury. What happened to these things? Charging 20% rent, that should be interest, that should be illegal, period. End of discussion. Again, if there were an opposition party, the first thing you'd run on, it's going to be illegal to charge more than 3% above the Fed funds rate, not the phony prime rate, but the real Fed funds rate. Why you could do that? You win every election immediately. Why don't we have public banking? The government produces the money, creates the money. Why doesn't it lend the money at 2-3% interest, as they do in some other countries? There used to be public banking. Well, I know there wasn't in the States, but there are in some states actually, but they used to be in France and in Europe. So you've given up all of this. This is very easy. This is absolutely simple. You cannot charge anybody more than 5% interest, period. Whatever. This is not hard. But the reason they don't do it is because the capitalist class controls the economy. And that's what everybody has to realize. They control the economy politically, because they control the economy because they get the benefits of the economy economically. And they have huge amounts of wealth. There's a huge disparity of wealth. They don't give a damn about anybody else. And we have to be able to organize about that and create a political movement that runs very simple things. Political movement which limited interest rates, ended foreign wars, and guaranteed health care would win every election. Every election. I don't care what you call it. Oh, it's like, everybody wants socialism just as long as you don't call it that. It's a socialist logic. It's a social logic, and everybody would vote for it. Everybody wants it. And it's possible. It's not impossible. It's not because we don't have the money or we don't have this. We have to spend the money right. That's what we have to do. And so these are all possible, but this is what the Democratic Party job is to prevent people from doing that, from thinking that. It's to prevent people from ever getting that. It's to take those demands that it knows they're there, and the dissatisfaction it knows is there, and give it a bear hug and say, yeah, and smother it to death. And that's the job of the Democratic Party, is to prevent these simple progressive policies from ever being enacted.
Oh, absolutely. One thing we know, for all the bad stuff that's going on and we're going to go broke and gas will be $10 a gallon and all these things, Trump wants $1.5 trillion to buy stuff that doesn't work now. Buy stuff that doesn't work. It's clear it doesn't work. We need to buy new air defense systems. They don't work. Who cares? They cost $1 billion each. Who cares? Yep. They weren't made to work. In fact, let me change this differently. They do work, because they're designed to make a lot of freaking money. They're money laundering operations. And what has happened is the money laundering operations have run into the battlefield. And once you get on the battlefield, money laundering operations don't work so well against hypersonic missiles and drones. And that's where we are. And your thoughts on the consequences of U.S. hard power slamming into, a Persian wall such as it has?
Yeah, look, the Americans thought, and they were right after the demise of the Soviet Union, that they were the superpower. They were a hyperpower. They could do anything they want. They could intimidate anybody they want. And they didn't really have to pay any attention to anybody. Certainly not China at that point, and not Russia, which was devolving. And they could just treat them as nuisances. So the defense industry went its merry old way, making money, producing for profit rather than purpose. Okay, because there was no purpose. So nobody's going to fight us. We're not going to get. So they produce boutique weapons and advanced weapons that are very, very expensive, very rare. They're hard to produce at scale, and they break down easily, and they require enormous amounts of maintenance, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And then you wake up after 30 years. And China is a powerhouse of production for purpose, for profit, but for purpose over profit. And Russia has, because of the sanctions and the economic warfare of the United States, and because of the situation with Ukraine, retooled its industry, to produce weapons at scale that are good and useful on the battlefield. I just saw the other day, someone said that it was an American defense organization. What's the best tank in the world? The T-72. Essentially a Soviet era tank, but they've upgraded it and upgraded it constantly. But it's reliable, it's easy to produce, it works, it's hard to kill, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So these are the kinds of things that now you've run into, as you say, you've run into the wall of reality that was being built. The wall of China's productive economy, Russia's military prowess, that all because the political and economic and military unity and dedication of those countries were something we were just blind to. Russia was a gas station with nuclear weapons. We didn't see that Putin was actually reinvigorating society politically and getting political support. And we didn't see that China was actually not just building toys, but it was building industries. And didn't see that because they were just, again, this is exceptionalism, American exceptionalism. They're these shithole countries or, minor countries that we don't have to contend with, think about. And suddenly you get into a situation where you run into that and you say, holy, and you have to realize to really contend with that, to do something about it, you got to say, how is it that we got here? What is it about our economy, our society that allows us to, first of all, ignore what they were doing and pretend it didn't happen? And secondly, to be doing something totally, financialized, speculative economy that we don't produce anything and all we do is, have these schemes for people to make a lot of money and become billionaires. What kind of society is that? What kind of economy is that? So these are things we're running into now. And that's, the answer. You have to have an economy. Look, AI is going to kill 20,000 jobs next week in Oracle. They did already. We do away with health. We do away with private health insurance industry. There's tens of thousands of people out of work. What do you do about them? So unless you have a planned economy that's organized and managed and planned by popular movement, by a movement of the people, for the purposes of making sure that the economic benefits of higher productivity go to the people, more than to 3 billionaires who become the next trillionaire or whatever. You have to have a socially managed economy. And that is a logic that's entirely different that we've ignored and denigrated for 50 years. We need socialism or barbarism, and that's what it is. And we're on the way to barbarism and socialism of our kind. We have to build it, but that's, it's not, we got to be China or we got to be Russia or we got to be, we have to build our own community, our own socially aware community and socially aware economy. And that's a political movement that we have to have on all fronts. And that's why I think the electoral front is an important front and we're excluded from it. So therefore we're going to have to be out in the goddamn streets. We have to go out in the streets.
I think people are going to be pissed this summer. I don't think no matter what happens with what has happened with the supply chain, ain't no way to dodge this punch. It's going to be right in the gut, but sometimes that's the only way that people wake up. Jim Kavanaugh, tell everybody where they can find you.
At my Substack, which is on the screen, also on X at the polemicist _. Please buy me a coffee. Subscribe free or paid to my Substack, and follow me on Twitter, X.
All right, Jim Kavanaugh, the polemicist. Thanks, everybody. And thanks for everybody that helps support the channel. You see everything scrolling across the bottom. If you can support the channel, share this on all your social media platforms. We're out.